yada die 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 die. Die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die die die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die die die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die. Yada die die die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die. Yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die die die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die, yada die 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 die. On page 11, L'chun Ranana. L'chun Ranana l'Adonai, nari al etzur yishenu, nikad mafana b'torah, bizmiro nari alo, nikad mafana b'torah, bizmiro nari alo, ki el gadol Adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim asher beyado mecharei haaretz v'toaf otarim lo asher beyado mecharei haaretz v'toaf otarim lo. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands form the earth's deep. Mountain crests too are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai, who formed us. And we stop there. And the tone of the opening stanza of L'chun Ranana is one of delight and joy and singing. And then we turn to page 12, and it's the conclusion of this first psalm, which is a doorway into Shabbat. Look at the second stanza, the long stanza. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like that time at Massah in the desert, when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my way. So in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. And the tone here is a downer. And I ask myself, why is this psalm the opening door into Shabbat? It begins with a sense of joy and uplift, and then it turns to sadness of those people are hard-hearted and they couldn't make it into the land, and what's going on here? And I answer my own question by saying, perhaps this psalm represents the hours before Shabbos, yesterday, you might say, which is an ordinary day, a day of confusion. And in our days, in our lives, there are moments of ambivalence. And we turn up and we also descend and fall down. And as we move forward into the Psalms leading into Shabbat, hopefully we are starting to ascend and move upwards into a new zone, a new experience. And I'm taking hold of this, and I want to reflect for just a few minutes. And in about 1 minute, we're going to share and study a poem. And I'll explain why. But in my mind, we're still in the after time of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And can we truly put all of our mental and spiritual energy concerning the Holocaust and the loss that we all suffered into one service 2 nights ago, into one day marked on our calendar of 24 hours? And I would say no. We're a little bit in recovery. And that's why in a moment we're going to share and study a poem which calls out to me, because we're still in the ambivalence of yesterday, which was a time of struggle, of remembering loss. And that's what that conclusion of the first Psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat is talking about, struggle and remembering loss. So now if you have the handout, it's a poem by Don Pagis, and it's a short piece. First, let me share just 1 or 2 sentences about Don Pagis. Don Pagis is born in 1930 in Romania, and his family experiences the Holocaust, and there is a great deal of loss within his local and his extended and his immediate and his extended family. And Don Pagis is eventually sent to a concentration camp, and he survives the concentration camp and leaves Europe, and he travels to what is then called Mandatory Palestine, which then later becomes Israel, as we all know. And he lives in Israel for a time, and he goes on, and he's a gifted writer and reader and thinker, and he gains a PhD in Hebrew literature. And he writes books of prose, and he writes many books of poetry. And he becomes a very well-known poet in Israel, and often he's associated with a voice of reflection upon the Holocaust. And we have to remember that in the late 40s, early 50s, and 60s and 70s, which is really, well, late 60s, because unfortunately he dies at the age of 55 or 56, cancer, which is 1986. So, but in his prime, you might say, in his influence, especially in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the whole country, the whole culture is still reverberating from the Holocaust. And so his voice, Don Pagis, this poet, is very much a voice that's held onto by the community of New Israel. So I have this poem which I wish to share, and it's now on the screen for those joining in at home. The title is Written in Pencil in the Sealed Freight Car. Here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. That's the poem. Written in pencil in the sealed freight car. Here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. First question is, what happened? This is poetry. How are we left when we hear this phrase, tell him that I? Louder. We're left unsettled. What else? Murray asks, what happened? What do you think what happened? Murray, what do you think happened?
Got killed.
It's a transport car. In Hebrew, it's a transport car. It's like a cattle car, but it's called a transport car in Hebrew. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. Who's doing the speaking? Eve. To whom is she speaking? Everyone who's ever listening. How is she speaking? She's writing, and what's she writing? She's speaking from her heart. But what is she writing? With what is she writing?
She's asserting self.
She's asserting self. What's the material by which she is writing? And what's the nature of pencil?
Can be erased.
Easily can be erased. And where is she writing in pencil? On a wall in a cattle car. And you and I, from our study and from our history, know what it was like, or have heard of lessons of Jewish people crammed into the cattle car. And what's the nature of the experience in the cattle car? No food, no water, no air, no sanitation, no movement. Like cattle in a cattle car, crowded together. Actually worse than cows in a cattle car. What would it have taken for Eve to have written with a pencil on a wall in a cattle car?
Inner strength. As much as physical strength, inner strength. But it's a desperate plea to assert self. I am still someone.
I'm still someone. It's a plea to assert, I'm still someone, in spite of the inhumanity of the elimination of the individual. What do you notice about the people mentioned? Here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. What do you remember of the characters and personalities from the Torah? No. What do you remember about Cain and Abel? What do you remember? Cain killed Abel. Remember that? Cain killed Abel. So here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. What does it mean? What is that I? What does it mean that Eve is with my son Abel? We know from Torah that Abel died.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We, the reader, are left to fill in what comes after that. What did she say? What did she want to say?
Exactly. We are left trying to fill in a gap.
Then I wonder why he killed her. Where is it?
Well, Abel's here. What does it mean Abel's here if, according to Torah, Abel is dead? What does that mean? Cain is alive, but remember, Cain is a wandering murderer with some kind of a mark on him, a mark of distinction. It doesn't mean distinguishment, it means distinction. And he's a wandering murderer forever, as he killed his brother. If you see my older boy Cain, son of Adam, focus on that for a moment. What does that mean, Cain, son of Adam? Yes.
Perhaps she's denying that it's her son. Adam and Eve. Takes after his dad.
Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve. Here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. Whose son is Abel? Only Eve's? Adam's son. So what's going on here?
No, that's not.
Okay. Maybe Eve and Abel are gone. What's left is Cain and Adam.
But if you are with one of your children, you don't say, this is my son, or I'm sorry, Manette and my son. Say, this is my son.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she's doing. I'm here with my son Abel. Adam is not there. They've been separated. Cain is no longer there. Maybe they were separated at the station when they were being loaded. Maybe they were killed earlier. Abel is with Mother Eve. With Mother Eve.
see Michael the Great King. All right, so where's Cain? What happened to Cain?
Where's
It
Cain?
seems that everything's the opposite there.
Things are opposite. So what is Don Pagis trying to say? Obviously, in the experience of coming out of the Holocaust, he was in a concentration camp.
I never saw a concentration camp. I went to Ahavas Chesed in Israel.
So it's horror beyond imagination.
Say the room of shoes is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're so panicky, they don't know what they're talking about. They're in this freight car, and they could be panicky, and they're not really themselves.
So this is one of Don Pagis's well-known, most famous poems, actually. It's very short, and in Hebrew it is just as abrupt as it is in English. And perhaps that's the message of this poem, that when dealing with terror, which erupts forward and consumes life, we are left with an emptiness and a void that can't be easily explained or addressed, and we try to put meaning into that emptiness, but we're searching. And every one of us is going to search differently to fill in the space. We're leaving gradually as the sun sets. We're exiting the shadow of Yom HaShoah. And we're starting to come back into normal time. Many American Jews are unfamiliar with the full name of Yom HaShoah. In Israel, the name is Yom HaShoah Ugvura. Gvura means growing into strength. Growing into strength. And as we exit Yom HaShoah and the sun is fading, we're a day away from Yom HaShoah, but the sunshine that is soon to be eclipsed by the darkness of Shabbat, we're moving forward into Shabbos, which is God's favorite time zone and Jewish life's favorite time zone, and we're trying to move forward into a time where we are stronger and we are renewed, and we are appreciating the beauty of pausing in freedom and in rest. That's what Shabbos is all about, pausing in beauty, in freedom, and in rest.
Why do some people believe the Holocaust never happened?
That is a very complicated question and a complicated answer,
What happened to 6 million people, right?
and maybe we'll talk about that in just a little bit after the service. For now, we're moving forward, and I wanted to introduce you to Yom HaShoah Ugvura, the day of Holocaust remembrance and coming forward into renewed strength. I want that to be our takeaway as we now move into Shabbos. Turning to the Lechadodi on pages 23 and 25, the first two stanzas on page 23, the last two stanzas on page number 25. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, hishme'anu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, l'shem u'tiferet v'lit hila, lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor habracha, Merosh Mikedem Nesucha Sof Maseh B'machashava Techila Lecha Jodi Likrat Kala Pnei Shabbat Nikabila Yamin Osmo Tifrotzi V'et Adonai Taritzi Al Yadish Ben Partsi Vanismecha V'nagila Lecha Jodi Likrat Kala Pnei Shabbat Nikabila Boi v'shalom ateret balach gam b'simcha u'v'tzahala toch emunei am segula boi chala lecha jodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat Nikabila. Psalm for Shabbat on page number 27. Page 27 of the Psalm for Shabbat. Mizmor shir liyom ha-Shabbat tov lahodot l'Adonai ulezamer l'shimcha elyon ulezamer l'shimcha elyon lahagid baboker chasdecha ve'emunatcha balelot alei asor v'alei navel Alei Gayon Bechinor Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tolodot L'Adonai Olezamer L'Shimcha Elyon Olezamer L'Shimcha Elyon Ki Simach Tananoi B'Falecha B'Maaseh Yodecha Aranen Magalo Maasecha Adonai Ma'od Amaku Machshavotecha Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lodot L'Adonai Olezamer L'Shimcha Elyon Olezamer L'Shimcha Elyon On page 28, the last two stanzas on the English side. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw. Tzadik katamar yifrach kerez balbanon yiskeh shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu Od yenovon beseva tisheni verananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avlatavon. Rising, the Borchu, page 39b. Baruchu et Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach L'olam Voed. On the English. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space. You completed your work of creation on the seventh day, calling this day from one evening to the next the holy Shabbat, and gave this day of rest in all its holiness to your people Israel, creator of day and night, ruling light before darkness and darkness from light, making day pass and bringing on the evening, distinguishing day from night. Adonai Tzvaot is your name, living and ever-present God. May your rule be with us forever and ever. Who brings each evening's stars. El Chai V'Kayam, Tamidim Lochalein Olam Voed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. And turning to the song sheet, Love Your God in a Moment, the song by Craig Talman, the song sheet, Love Your God.
Love your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul. Love your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. Where you live, where you lie, where you stumble, where you thrive, with all you speak, with all you know, with all your soul. Be like God, one like God, in love and life. Be like God, love like God, with all your heart, with all your might, with all your soul. When you seek, when you soar, when you breathe and breathe no more, love your God, be with God, go with God.
Ba'avatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Page 41. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. A few moments of silence, page 42. Adonai Elohechem emet. Mi chamocha on page 44. Umalchuto beratzon kiblu alehem Moshe uMiriam uvenei Yisrael lecha anu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam mi chamocha bo'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osef eleh Malchutecha ra'u vanecha bokea yam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov ug'alo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. As we turn to page 45, the Hashkivenu, I ask you also to turn to the handout entitled "A Prayer for Ukraine," which we will be interposing within the Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu is a call. It's a command, actually, in terms of the grammar. All of us bring our voices together as one united voice, and we're commanding God to assist every person to lay down on the bed tonight with a sense of peace and calm. So it's not enough if blessedly, or as a function of who knows how many factors, you and I are able to put our heads down on our pillows comfortably. It's not enough. The expectation of Hashkivenu is that every person on the planet should be able to place his or her head down on a pillow with calm. God in heaven, creator of all flesh, worker of wonders, do not stay silent. Do not remain voiceless. Do not keep aloof. For an evil man has come to power and declared war on another country, saying, "We will rise up violently against you in battle." Join me, please. But you, God, have commanded us in your sacred scriptures, saying, "Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. I am God. Therefore, make the aggressor desist from destruction." We pray to you now, God of the spirits of all flesh, to use your infinite power to end these acts of bloodshed and terror. Spread peace across the earth and bring joy to all its inhabitants, so that the words of the prophets can be fulfilled. The warrior's bow will be broken, and peace will be promised to all peoples. God will judge between the nations and arbitrate between many countries. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And let us say, Amen. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. V'shamru, the top of page 46.
Shabbat, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נחת. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם לעולם. ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נחש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נחש.
Before Kaddish, I just want to make a short thought. Turn to page 52, please. Page 52. Because of where this paragraph is located, many people presume that it's the end of the Amida, but it's not. Because the Amida, as you know, always ends, in this case, page 51, with the bracha of shalom, whether it's a morning service, afternoon service, evening service, regular service, Shabbos service, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The Amida always ends with the bracha for shalom. So therefore, any paragraph after the bracha for shalom is not officially part of the Amida. But when I was growing up, I was taught, say this, and so I learned it. And people who are taught, say the Amida, learn this prayer. But officially, this prayer is not part of the Amida. Officially, this prayer is the composition of one man, and we don't even know his name. We know his father's name. His father's Ravina. This man is known as the somebody whose father is Ravina. Mar Bar Ravina. We don't know the name of the composer. We know his dad. His dad would be so proud his son got published as an anonymous prayer composer. What does this tell us? It tells us that a certain man wrote his own prayer to be said by himself after the prayer for shalom. And he began saying it. And people liked it so much that they picked it up and they began saying it too. And starting in the 300s, people began to imitate and echo this prayer and say it on their own. And somebody, we don't know who, never bothered to write down the originating man who said this prayer, but it caught on. Why am I telling you this? Because this is a prayer that came forth from one individual, and there wasn't a goal to record his name for posterity. It was one person's prayer. And people liked it. This is a call for you and me to compose individual prayers and to weave them into the Amida, before, after, in between, during. So in a moment, after the Kaddish, when we rise, it's up to us. And the traditional text is here, pages 47 to 52. And we can echo those words which have been handed down for 1,800 years, or we can interpose our own prayers as well. And who knows, perhaps your own private meditation will be picked up and echoed by somebody 500 years from now. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'gala ba'gala uv'izman kariv v'meru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevorach la'olam me olmaya yitbarach v'ishtabach v'itpar v'truma v'naseh v'hadar v'taleh v'talal shemei dekudesh abrichu leila min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'meru amen. If so able, we rise, silent prayer. Page 54. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba b'miru amen Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach li'olam li'olmei olmaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yosei d'arveda shmei kudesha b'richu le'ila min kol berchata v'shirata tishbachata v'nechamata dam yom b'miru amen Titkabel tzadon b'don d'chayis v'kad mishvei miru amen Yesh chesed miru amen Oseh shel mermama v'yaseh shalom Aleinu chesed miru amen. The night before last, Yom HaShoah was commemorated publicly in Mobile, Alabama. As has been the tradition for at least 42, perhaps 45 years, or maybe a little bit more, this service marks the shared input of Jews and Christians. First brought to us by Mary and Paul Philbin of the then embryonic and ongoing later on Jewish-Christian dialogue of blessed memory, and then thereafter Jerry Daring and Sister Ann Brady and Don Barry, and still ongoing Don Barry's Touch. And for 2 years, we met on screen. And again, it was as a result of the push and the impetus of our friend Dr. Don Barry that brought Yom HaShoah out in a virtual platform. But the night before last, Don echoed all of our sentiments. It's good to be back together again. And we came together for a beautiful service. And it was, I think, a lovely and uplifting and beautiful service. But sweeter than the music, and if I can say this without getting into trouble from Yeshiva Shomala, God's heavenly hosts, perhaps even more powerful than the prayer was the presence of our Christian friends, especially young Christian teenagers. There were students there from St. Dominic's, and we owe a debt beyond what we can repay to Sister Ann Brady and other teachers and parents who have encouraged their children to participate in Yom HaShoah. And some students prepared artwork, and some prepared poetry and prose, and much of it was on display, and some of it was incorporated into the service. There's an 11-year-old, Eliana, and she drew a compelling piece, and that was the cover of the evening program. And I spoke with her after the service, and she explained why she wanted this symbolism here and this symbolism there. And it was a beautiful piece. She's 11 years old in 6th grade. And Monica, who's in 8th grade, frankly, I think was a little nervous about coming up onto the bima and sharing her poem in public, but she did so. And you and I know many adults who are not capable of standing up on a pulpit in front of a community. But 8th grade, 14-year-old Monica did so. And then I had a chance to speak with other students who had painted and drawn beautiful pictures. And Anna is drawing this picture, and it's kind of a landscape, an abstract landscape. And this is red because this is the blood. And here's the dark color of the swastika, which is like a cloud of darkness covering part of the sky. But over here are birds and mountains symbolizing the hope of the Jewish people. She's 14 years old. And so on, Sophie and Mary Linda. These children participated by creating art and poetry and prose. If you had asked me to put together a poem or prose or draw, paint a picture on a free day and then show up at a synagogue when I was 11, 12, 13, 14 years old on a free night, I don't think I would have accomplished that goal and that task and that feat. And here we had a number of students who had reached out by reaching in to their own hearts and their spirits, unlocking a gift of compassion and humanity. And they were honored to be asked to participate by having their artwork featured and the poetry and the prose included in the evening program. And their parents, justifiably, were very proud and excited, and they stood where they were with their chests puffed out, as they well deserved, when they saw these 6th grader and 3 or 4 8th graders standing up on the bima participating. But most of all, I give credit to the teachers, because it was the teachers who managed to unlock, to motivate, to lift up in enthusiasm and energy these children to come into a Jewish house of prayer in respectful and giving comportment, to teach a message of kindness and of hope. And I'm thinking about these children. And that's the greatest gift. That's why I think that even perhaps beyond the actual prayers that were recited, the most powerful element of the service the other night was that we, in some way, have put forth a touch with our own fingers, with our caring, with our friendship, with our gaining of Christian friends, neighbors, and allies, such that this touch has now percolated out into the world and been felt by 6th and 7th and 8th graders. And these children will never be the same. We can count on these children as being giving, compassionate people motivated by a humanitarian streak that's taken root as a function of their lives in Mobile, Alabama. And regardless of what's going on in the world today, as you and I see ever-increasing tones of anti-Semitism and marginalization, you and I can know that our touch here in Mobile is going to remain and grow in strength. And that's the gift that I saw the night before last. And that's why I'm hopeful, in spite of some moments of darkness, because of the care of children, nurtured by the care of teachers, and supported by the care of parents. We have much to be grateful for. It's on the heels of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. You might say that the presentation of the children the night before last is after the loss of all of our loved ones. And the phrase, after the loss, is ringing in my heads for a very particular reason. Because tomorrow's Torah reading is called Acharei Mot, after the loss, after the death. Aaron, Moses' brother, Aaron, the high priest, Aaron, father of 4 adult sons, witnesses the loss, the death of 2 of his children in his own presence before him. And he is left stupefied. He is left mute as he is supposed to inaugurate for the very first time ever a Jewish communal experience of worship. It's the first time ever, and he doesn't even know what to do or how to proceed. And this is Aaron, one of the greatest leaders of all time, and he's been marked by Acharei Mot, after the loss of, after the death of, and he doesn't know how to move forward until his baby brother, Moses, steps up and not as lawgiver, not as a man who has stood on Mount Sinai holding the stone tablets, but as a younger brother, Moses guides his elder brother forward after the loss, after the death. And now I think you can see why that phrase and that tone has been swirling around in my head, because it's after the loss, after the death that all of us have inherited by being Jews, of all those Jewish people lost during the Holocaust, that you and I hear a voice by younger people, and it's a voice of love, of compassion, that's guiding us forward. We have strength upon which to draw. May we continue to draw upon this strength. And we all say, Amen. We rise now, please, the Olenu on page number 56. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanuk goye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yosei haaretz Umoshav yekarov hashamayim mimol ushchinatu zol v'gavei meromim hu Eloheinu einod emet malkeinu efes zulato kakatu b'torato v'yadata yom v'ashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim V'al haaretz mitachat einod. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam v'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad. In a moment, the mourner's Kaddish, found here on page 58, and those who are reciting Kaddish are invited to remain standing, if so able. Kaddish on page number 58. On this Shabbos, remember with great love Arnold Tobin, Max Schwartz, Sharon Lafer, Herman Unger, Judith Morton Mayer, Morris Loeb, Harry Meisler, Samuel Berkowitz, Alvin Loeb, Ida S. Rosenblum, Blanche Sass, Libby Rose Rubin, Robert Levinson, Dora Yoles, James Conlon, Rosalie Rossner, Murray Schwartz, Gisela Lupin, Henrietta Stern, Kay Podem, Madeline Fass. Are there any other names to mention this evening? And perhaps a name mentioned at home? Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabo. Amen. Be'olma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'b'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabo mivorach la'olam l'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shmei dekudisha b'rechu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'yimeru. Amen. Yehei Shloma Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru. Amen. Our love and our prayers go forth to all who are mourning and all who are grieving. Just looking ahead, of course, tomorrow morning, Shabbos morning services, 10 to about 11:30 in person and also on YouTube. Tomorrow evening, Havdalah, Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah, 8 p.m. If you have any questions, contact me and I will attempt. Well, see, here's the problem, because I won't really be checking my email until after Havdalah. So if anybody wants the Zoom info, check the email that went out, and hopefully that'll help you join in for the Havdalah. Monday, of course, is Tanakh study. Tuesday is Adult Hebrew, session 2. It's season 2, I should say. We're moving forward. We're having people join in learning basic Hebrew, and now we're moving a little bit further past the alphabet into some of the introductory Shabbos morning prayers. And Tuesday, Spirit on Zoom, Spirit discussion, is judgment the same as judgmental? And looking ahead, just as a few reminders, May 15th is Sunday morning. It's the annual meeting. Please make plans to join us. RSVP to the office that you'll be here so we have enough food for the luncheon. And looking further ahead, don't forget Guitar Shabbat, May 27th, and also June 12th, we're going to have a cemetery beautification project. And more details will be coming forward, but it's going to be June 12th, 8 in the morning to 11 in the morning, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., volunteers helping beautify our Shul Cemetery. We're going to conclude with a song on the song sheet and then Kiddush and Hamotzi. The song on the song sheet is Never Walk Alone by Ross Levy. It's a modern take on Tefilat Haderech. Have a safe journey, and we all are in need of a safe journey in the hours and the years ahead. Never walk alone.
May we never walk the road alone. May we always be sheltered in peace. Walking hand in hand, side by side, soul by soul, may we someday all come to know. May the ways of health and joy reach the hearts of each girl and boy, from now through forever. From now through forever. path that God has given us, and may we always be happy and free. Every step you take it safely, and in every stride, find joy and pride. May we never walk the road alone, and may we always be sheltered in peace. Adonai oz le'amo yiteh. Adonai oz le'amo yiteh. Adonai oz le'amo yiteh. May we never walk the road alone. May we always be sheltered in peace. Sheltered in peace. Sheltered in peace. Sheltered in
May we always be sheltered in peace. And perhaps those joining at home will make Kiddush with us, and those here at Shul are invited to have Kiddush and a motzi here in the back of the sanctuary. We have wine and we have grape juice. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagofen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho v'yaba'u v'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maseh bereshit ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim ki avanu v'acharta v'otanu kidasha mikol amim v'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava v'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh ha-Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. May the sweetness of the wine and the the light of the challah follow you for the rest of the Shabbos. May you know that you're loved and you're a source of blessing. Good Shabbos. Litrot. Until we see each other again in person. Shalom.